It's the oldest game in history, the game of trust. From Babylon's dusty markets to Wall Street's neon screens, every empire has played it. Promise value today, in exchange for belief in tomorrow. Because money, any money, only works when people believe it does. The symbol changes. The faith stays the same. But every game needs new players, new believers, new debtors. And when they stop joining, the game ends. The trust fades. The empire falls. So what if the U.S. economy isn't an exception? What if it's just the latest version of an ancient lie, wrapped in dollars instead of silver, and guarded not by kings, but by banks? Every civilization swore it had found the secret to endless prosperity. Everyone believed their system was too big to fail. Everyone collapsed when belief ran out. The question isn't if history repeats. It's whether we recognize the rhyme before the final verse. Long before Wall Street, before dollars, interest rates, or credit scores, there were tablets and debt. In ancient Babylon, the cradle of civilization, money wasn't paper. It wasn't gold coins. It was promises, etched in clay. Barley was food. Silver was value. But the true currency was obligation. Farmers borrowed grain in the spring to sow their fields. They repaid it in the fall if the harvest came. But crops failed. Rivers flooded. Droughts scorched. And when the grain didn't grow, the debt grew instead. The priests, the lenders, didn't lose. They added interest. They demanded more. Here's the trap. The only way to keep the system alive was to create more debt, more borrowers, bigger obligations. That's not economics. That's extraction. As debt mounted, land was seized. Sons and daughters were taken as collateral. Families became bonded to the temples, working not or profit but to survive. This wasn't an accident. This was the design. Sound familiar? Just one more credit card. Just refinance again. Just trust the experts. It's not that different today. We no longer kneel before the temple, but we do stand in line at the bank. And just like Babylon, our modern system depends on one thing. More must owe. More must join. Or it all collapses. Most people think Charles Ponzi invented the Ponzi scheme in 1920. But all he did was give it a name. The idea. Pay early participants with the money from new ones. As long as more people join, it looks sustainable. Until the music stops. But look deeper. How does Social Security work? How does Medicare stay funded? How do pension systems survive? Answer. They depend on new workers paying in to fund the old. What happens when there aren't enough new workers? Or when people live longer, retire earlier, and cost more? The answer isn't in textbooks. It's in the collapse of every pyramid-shaped promise in history. The empire grew, but the silver shrank. At its height, Rome was the world. Its legions stretched from Britain to Egypt. Its roads connected continents. Its coins, denarii, bore the face of emperors and the promise of value. Each silver coin was not just currency, it was trust, identity, power. But empires don't feed themselves. Wars with Parthia, uprisings in Gaul, the constant need for expansion and spectacle. Wars are expensive. Bread must be subsidized. The Colosseum must roar. And Rome, though mighty, was not immune to the oldest trap in finance. When there isn't enough money, fake more. At first, Roman coins were 95 to 98% pure silver. But by the time of Emperor Gallienus, that number dropped below 5%. They melted old coins, mixed in cheap alloys, and stamped new ones. The image stayed the same. The weight nearly matched. But the value? Gone. This was currency debasement, the quiet theft no citizen voted for. And at first, it worked. Markets still accepted the coins. Legions were still paid. The illusion held. But Rome's citizens weren't fools. They noticed the silver was duller. Their wages bought less. Inflation ignited. A loaf of bread that once cost 1 coin, now cost 10. Salaries didn't rise. Taxes did. The poor starved. The middle class vanished. The rich hoarded gold and fled to the countryside. Sound familiar? Rome didn't collapse in one night. It crumbled slowly, through thousands of small lies etched in cheap metal. Debasement wasn't just an economic trick. It was a message. We will give you less, and tell you it's the same. And once trust dies in money, everything built on that money begins to rot. The U.S. economy is $28 trillion in debt. And rising. That number feels too big to matter, abstract, distant. But it isn't. It's the quiet engine beneath everything you see. Every skyscraper, every university, every home mortgage. It's all powered by the same invisible fuel, debt. Ask yourself, why? Because debt fuels everything. Corporations borrow to buy back their own stock, boosting share prices without innovation. Governments borrow to fund wars, subsidies, and promises they can't afford. Students borrow for degrees priced higher than their starting salaries. Families borrow for homes, just to be told you're investing in the dream. Even hospitals and clinics borrow to buy the machines that keep us alive. Debt has become the bloodstream of the modern economy. And like any addiction, it takes more each year to feel the same high. In a healthy economy, debt creates value. A farmer borrows to plant crops, sells them, repays the loan, and profits. That's productive debt. But today, much of our debt doesn't build. It recycles. Money is borrowed not to create new wealth, but to paper over the gaps between illusion and reality. Debt creates demand. Demand creates spending. Spending creates GDP. GDP justifies more debt. It's a self-reinforcing illusion. A wheel that must keep spinning faster. Because if it slows down, it reveals the truth. There's no growth, only motion. And the machine runs on belief. Belief that the future will be more profitable than the past. Belief that loans will be repaid. Belief that tomorrow's taxes will fund today's promises. But belief isn't infinite. When the public starts questioning, when investors pull back, when confidence wavers, the any stutters, and when it stops, debt doesn't vanish, it collapses inward. Just like in any Ponzi scheme. As long as new money flows in, it looks alive. But when the inflows slow, the illusion racks. And what we called growth turns out to be debt, dressed as prosperity. The most powerful force in the economy isn't gold, isn't oil, isn't interest rates. It's confidence, not logic, not balance sheets, just trust. Confidence is what turns ink and paper into money. Confidence is what makes strangers accept your paycheck. Confidence is what keeps banks solvent, even when they only hold a fraction of your money. But confidence is fragile. And when it cracks, the whole system feels it. Let's look back. In 2008, Lehman Brothers collapsed not because it was insolvent that morning, but because no one believed it was solvent that evening. In Weimar Germany, people abandoned marks for bread. Not because the currency vanished overnight, but because they lost faith it would be worth anything tomorrow. In Argentina, Zimbabwe, and Venezuela, it wasn't the lack of money. It was the lack of trust. Trust in leadership. Trust in value. Trust in the system. So what happens when confidence in the U.S. economy falters? When foreign governments stop buying our debt? When citizens convert dollars to crypto, gold, or anything else? When younger generations stop believing Social Security will still be there? The pyramid starts to tremble. Not because the money disappears, but because the belief does. That's how every Ponzi ends. Not with $0, but with zero trust. The day people stop believing the next generation will pay the tab is the day the music stops. Remember Silicon Valley Bank in 2023? A whisper turned into panic. Startups pulled their funds. A healthy balance sheet was crushed, not by math, but by momentum. It was a miniature collapse of confidence. A preview. Now imagine that, but scaled to an entire country. A run, not on a bank, but on the dollar itself. In ancient Rome, emperors had one job in crisis. Keep the bread flowing. Keep the games going. Keep the illusion alive. Today, that illusion lives on, not in colosseums, but in central banks. And at the center of it all stands one institution: the Federal Reserve, the most powerful unelected body in America. They don't build roads. They don't run schools. They print belief. When the stock market panics, the Fed cuts rates. When COVID shut down the world, the Fed printed $4 trillion. When banks tremble, homes slump, or inflation spikes, everyone turns to one wizard behind the curtain, whispering into markets, "Everything is fine." But ask yourself, where does this money come from? It's not earned. It's not mined. It's made. From thin air. Just digits, conjured to coup. EP the machine humming. And every solution plants seeds for the next crisis. Problem, fix, bigger problem. Too much risk in housing. Cut rates. Creates the 2008 crash. COVID kills demand. Inject trillions. Sparks the inflation surge of 2022. Banks struggling. Bail them out quietly. Weakens public trust in the system. It's not a fix. It's a loop. A financial musical chairs, where chairs disappear while the music plays louder. And everyone's dancing. Investors. Politicians. Homebuyers. Retirees. But no one asks, what happens when the music stops? What if the real collapse doesn't start with a crash, but with a whisper? It won't be fireworks. It'll be fatigue. Fatigue from broken promises. From stimulus that no longer stimulates. From rates that rise and never really fall. From knowing deep down that if this were truly a sustainable system, we wouldn't need constant rescue. Rome didn't collapse overnight. It eroded from within. From emperors who debased currency. From bread that ran out. From trust that quietly died. So ask yourself, is the Fed saving the system, or simply managing the decline? Let's be clear. This isn't fear-mongering. It's not some doomsday clickbait. This is reality. Yes, the U.S. economy is powerful. It's innovative. It's resilient. It has reinvented itself before. And it can again. But resilience isn't the same as invincibility. Systems collapse not because they're weak, but because they ignore the warning signs. They fall when they overpromise returns they can't deliver, underinvest in real innovation, and most dangerously, lose the trust of the people who believe in them. So can it be fixed? Yes. But not with gimme CKs. Not with buy now, pay later economics. The solution: 1. Radical transparency. People don't need perfect systems. They need honest ones. Stop hiding liabilities. Stop manipulating interest rates like mood stabilizers. Treat citizens like shareholders, and show them the real numbers. 2. Real value creation. An economy cannot thrive on paper wealth alone. We must build things that matter. Manufacture again. Invest in energy, infrastructure, education, innovation. Shift focus from speculation to production. 3. Financial education for all. Empires fall when people are blind to the mechanics of power. If money is the game, teach the rules. In schools, in homes, on platforms like this. So the next GE narration doesn't inherit confusion, they inherit clarity. Because the truth is, we can fix this. But only if we stop pretending. Stop pretending that debt has no consequence. Stimulus is free. Printing is progress. The lies that brought Rome down are the same lies whispered into every economic bubble in history. This isn't the end, but it is a fork in the road. We can either double down on the illusion or rebuild the foundation of trust. The choice, as always, begins with awareness. Because once you see how the system works, you can choose how to move within it or build something better. History doesn't repeat, but it does echo. Let this echo be a warning and a call. Every collapse is also a beginning. The ruins of Babylon gave way to new trade. The fall of Rome paved the way for Renaissance. And maybe, just maybe, exposing the illusion now can forge a stronger foundation for what comes next. But only if we wake up. If this story made you think differently about the system, subscribe, because we have more untold truths to expose. Comment, do you think the economy is sustainable, or are we all part of a bigger illusion? Share this with someone who needs to understand the danger of trust without transparency. Because when a system demands more believers to survive, it's not an economy. It's a scheme.